This is Genuine Connections, featuring collaborative conversations about community, content, creativity, commerce, and the convergence of media and marketing.
Hi, and welcome to this edition of Genuine Connections. I am Genuine's CMO, Matt Wurst. I also moonlight as the host of Genuine Connections podcast. And I'm really excited today to be talking with really one of the most innovative, strategic leaders in our industry. Dana Hork is one of those rare marketers who's just as comfortable inside a Fortune 1 company as she is taking friends, colleagues, strangers on a beer run to reimagine what a brand can be. We'll find out what that means. But in an industry that's obsessed with speed and scale and sometimes shortcuts, Dana's all about people. She's about purpose and she's about performance. She's the founder and CEO at Beers with Friends, which we'll learn more about. But she's also worked at and led teams at some of the biggest companies on the planet: Walmart, Jet. She was the head of social, SVP of marketing at Wonder, previously at Pepsi and JP Morgan. And oh, yeah, she also has her MBA from Harvard. So let's get into this conversation because I am sure we're going to learn something. We're going to discover something. We're going to potentially create something. But no matter what, it's going to be a genuine connection. Dana, welcome to Genuine Connections. Thank you so much for being here. It's good to see you.
It's so good to see you. Thank you for having me.
So you and I have danced around this marketing technology dance floor for a number of years, but this is really the first time that our paths have deliberately intersected. But I want to know more about you because you've led these big, bold brand campaigns and initiatives and strategies with many of the biggest companies, if not the biggest company in the world. But now, Beers with Friends, it's innovative. We're going to talk about your approach, but what's been this through line for you in terms of how you approach that strategy, that brand building, regardless of the size or stage that you're on?
Yeah, so I'll give a few highlights of where I've been and then try to connect the dots. So I have been everywhere from scrappy to scale. So I've built brands at startups, whether my own or I was an early hire at jet.com, and then was also an early hire at Wonder. And then, as you mentioned, I was at Walmart. I ran social media for Walmart, which is the Fortune 1. So I have been everywhere from scrappy to scale and have learned how to build brands at every stage. And I think a through line that I have seen over the course of my career is that no matter the stage of the business, no matter the sector of the company, no matter how much money it's raised or how big the team is, you've always got an ambition gap. You always want to do more than whatever you have available to you. And that entrepreneurial mindset of tackling that challenge is something I've brought to each one of those experiences. And it's certainly now a big part of what I'm doing as the CEO and founder of Beers with Friends, a creative agency.
Okay, so we'll get to that. So as I'm thinking about Jet and Walmart, which are massive scale machines among many other things, and Wonder, which is one of my favorite emerging companies in terms of just a restaurant option to go to when I'm going out for lunch in New York City, but the integration with Grubhub and Seamless and this whole ecosystem, right? That's been about elevating food through tech, maybe. So those experiences now have put you directly in front of consumers. How have consumer expectations evolved in the time that you've had with those companies to what you're doing now?
So I think the consumer expectations for years and decades and maybe centuries, we could go all
Mm-hmm.
the way back, have largely been consistent. I think, you know, people as humans want to feel seen and they want the brands and the products that they engage with and use to help them solve their daily life challenges. They want to help them get through the day so they can, spend more time with what matters, et cetera, et cetera. I think what's changed is not consumers' expectations of how brands can meet their needs, but really with social media, technology, like a million different innovations, we've now made it more possible to do that at speed, to do that at scale, and better meet those consumer expectations. So I don't think it's about, consumers demanding or asking more. I think they've always expected a lot from, the people and products around them. I just think we're better able to deliver against those expectations. And what an exciting time to be a part of that transformation.
And if expectations haven't necessarily changed, behaviors probably have, and
Certainly.
where and how they engage with each other, with brands, that has certainly evolved. Uh, and it's created this sense of community, which is a word that I know gets overused a lot. But as far as how I think about it, how we think about it, it's not a nice to have anymore. It's really become infrastructure. So, in your infinite curiosity and someone who has her finger on the pulse of this industry, you don't have to name names, but when you look at brands that are doing it right, as far as their relationship with consumer and community, what stands out for you?
Brands that build with and not only for is critical to brands that have traction and are successful today. I think, it's funny how you and I originally got to know each other was through the wild world of Web3, where the promise was, right, decentralization and
Mm-hmm.
community building, and building with and not for. And no matter if it's Web3 technology or AI or, pick any technology that you'd like, part of what we're seeing is democratizing access to brands, and community is a really integral part of that. And when I think about community, I don't just think about it in terms of consumers and, building with your consumers. And it's not just, voting for the next flavor of the month and all that kind of stuff. Community is 360. So it's your consumers, it's your employees, it's your vendors, it's your partners, it's governments and towns, and how you work with your broader community says a lot about who you are as a brand, what you value, and consistency across that community is key. Because in a world where everything's on social and everything is public, if you're not consistent with how you treat everybody, the world's going to figure it out pretty quickly. And so I think community is key. You've got to build with, and it's not just with consumers, it's with all your stakeholders.
Yeah, thinking about that total ecosystem can be daunting, especially when you've worked with extremely large brands. One of the words that has become more in vogue and then maybe even overplayed, but still holds its importance in my mind, is this idea of personalization. Personalization for Walmart versus a small emerging company that's looking to challenge big brands is going to obviously mean different things, especially within this context of community and individuality. As someone who led social media for Walmart, how did you think about scaling content in an otherwise corporate setting back in those early days?
Yeah, so I think we've seen a real emergence around scaling authentic storytelling inside large organizations by tapping into your own employee base, for
Hmm.
example. So something that we had at Walmart is we had a local social program where each and every store had its own Facebook page and then Instagram page, and basically turned our associates into advocates and allowed them to tell local stories. And yes, you can support that at
That's great.
a, national or international level with inspiration and ideas and all of that, but nothing beats the authentic story of someone telling it on the ground in their local store. And by empowering your employees to do that and not centralizing control but decentralizing it, it really enables your brand to be authentic through the voice of your greatest asset, your employees and your team.
Fast forward to today, you think about like video is everywhere. Everyone is a creator. We have these creative tools in our hands and at our fingertips. I I still think meaningful video is rare and undervalued. What do you think separates content that gets attention from content that actually drives action, whatever that action, desired action of a brand may be?
Yeah, I think that earning attention and action comes from three things. And we have a framework for this at Beers with Friends called Brand in a Can. So the first piece is the ingredients. You have to know who you are as a brand, what's on the inside, your mission, your vision, your values. These are the things that are eternal to your business and brand. They don't change, and they're a true North Star. And so those are your brand ingredients. The second piece is what you share with the outside world, your assets, your actions, how you show up, right? And they're a manifestation of your values. And so, in order to build resonance and connection, those two things should be in lockstep with meaningful values and what you stand for, and then actions that are consistent and live out those values. And lastly, the third piece of that is so critical is the impression that you leave, and that's what builds trust. And if you think about, well, what's the impression that I want to leave? It's not what you say about yourself. It's what people say about you when you're not in the room. And you have to be really intentional about building those ingredients, those assets and actions, and ultimately thinking about the impression you want to leave. And if you do all of those things correctly with intention, with consistency, that's how you make an impression on others that lasts and that's sticky and that's resonant and that enables you to show up in culture authentically, that gives you a guidepost for when you should participate and when you shouldn't. So we really encourage brands to know thyself and build their brand in a can, if you will, so that they have a framework for figuring out how to leave that lasting impression and build
I
that
wrote it down. No one loves a good framework more than I do, maybe except for you. So
Yes.
I love this idea of brand in a can, which fits beautifully with this beers with friends broader visualization, right? And it's not, I don't know if you call it an agency, a consultancy, you tell me, but it's not typical. And I'm curious how it started, what itch you were trying to scratch with this concept.
Yeah, so I'm a longtime brand side marketer, Jet, Walmart, Wonder,
Mm-hmm.
and the traditional ways that ambitious marketers try to close that ambition gap and get more done is either hiring more folks in house to move more
Mm-hmm.
quickly or hiring an agency of record. And in this day and age where we're moving at the speed of social, and where brands are looking for much more flexibility and marketing calendars are not pre-planned 18 months in advance,
Can't be.
you
No.
need to have a solution that's much more agile. And technology is solving part of this by giving everyone the tools to ask a question and have copywriters at their disposal and all the things. But it also means that you need to be able to tap into service providers with expertise and skills that enable you to do that, but perhaps in new ways. And so the impetus for Beers with Friends was based on my own experience client side for all those years, where I wanted more speed. I wanted someone to focus on me. I wanted to move quickly. I wanted, as an old boss of mine used to say, I wanted someone to be brief, be brilliant, and be gone. And so Beers with Friends is not an agency of record, it's an agency on call. And
Mm.
you can hire us to spin up an A team with the right people for your brief, not just whoever is free and available at the agency. Sprint in 5-day increments, which we call a beer run. Tap into our focus because we work on one client at a time, and access firepower that you don't normally have access to around the table. It's impossible for brands to have all of the expertise they need in-house all the time. And so if we need a Gen Z expert or we need a social strategist, like those are the teams that we curate around each and every beer run, which means that you're getting the A team and you're paying it from, when we're live, and you're not paying for it when you're not. We think of it as creativity on tap.
So walk us through a beer run, right? What happens during those 5 days that traditional agency models just don't unlock?
Yeah. So the first thing that happens is we take your business brief and we make sure we turn that into a consumer brief or a consumer insight. So if you say, I want to sell more widgets, we spend day one making sure we understand what is the real impediment to selling more widgets. And it's not because people don't know your brand, and it's not because you need to do more marketing and spend more money. Like, what is a real consumer driven insight as to why they might not be considering it, or why it's not resonant in their everyday life. And so we make sure and we align on that problem with the client. I don't know how many times I sat client side and I was always confused why I would write a business brief and then there was the second brief that the agency would have to brief into the creative team. And I'm like, well, what is that? I gave the brief. Now I know what it is. And
now it's a game of telephone. It's slightly watered down, right? You don't have direct access to the makers.
100%. And so we make sure that we actually get the client aligned to that. So we're building off of an insight that feels true, that doesn't feel like it's undoing work that clients have already done. If they bring us something, great. If we don't have it, we'll pull something forward. But we spend the beginning making sure we're aligned on the real consumer problem that we're solving. And then we go through and we pull inspiration of what great looks like. We look at other examples, maybe from the sector, not from the sector, but what does great look like for whatever this problem is that we're trying to solve? And we use that as a jumping off point to say, okay, great. Now that we've got a standard of what great looks like and we know what consumer problem we're trying to solve, what are all of the different ways we could solve this problem? So in the case of a campaign development beer run, it might be that we come up with 20, 30 different campaign lines and campaign concepts. And the magic of Beers with Friends is we don't go off into a room and 3 weeks later come back with 3 perfect ones. We actually show you what all that raw material looks like, and we sift through it together side by side with the client. And we're saying, yep, this one's a keeper. This could be a great tactic. That's not the big idea, but it's a great email subject line. And we go through and we align on something together with the client. And then the back half is really pulling it all together. So for instance, in a campaign beer run, what does the chosen campaign look like in the channels that the client is looking to activate in? And out of the beer run comes, get ready for another beer metaphor, a brew print that is specifically
yeah, I could do this all day, by the way. Keep those coming.
Thank you. Yes, we have plenty of beer puns. But it's a pre-aligned blueprint of whatever, breadth and depth we agreed on with the client. If you need 100 cool ideas to sell in for budget, or you want, 100 out-of-home headlines, for a new campaign, we can move the toggle and your blueprint is what you need to then go make it happen.
First of all, any good beer pun will put some hops in my step, but we'll come back to that.
Plus one for you. Can you get animation on this? Like, ding!
There's innovation in how we deliver this
yes.
to our listener and viewer. Yes. But there's innovation, it sounds like, in the way you gather inputs, in your process, the output, and then ultimately the outcome. As you're working with marketers and you've worked with agencies, you've worked with brands, you've probably worked with technology innovators in that holy trinity of marketing innovation. But is there anything that you think marketers commonly misunderstand about innovation itself? Like, can you ask for innovation?
Yeah, I think that people assume out of the box and creativity is unmakeable. And I think that something that has been at the core of Beers with Friends from the very beginning, when James and I were sketching this out, was the idea of remarkable makeable. Like, big ideas are fun, but makeable is what builds momentum. It's what you can actually make in the world. And so I think sometimes people misunderstand, like, oh, this is just cool stuff I can never do. But actually, we put constraints at the core of our process. And if you're like, hey, I need ideas where I don't have to talk to the product team because they're jamming on something else, or I don't have budget this quarter for CTV, so don't put that in the channel mix. And instead, we want to apply it to something else. Like, we put that at the core. And I think it we're not thinking about awards and like we're thinking about what you need to get your brand out into the world and hit your KPIs. And so I think the remarkable makeable mindset makes us really unique, and we're always reinforcing that with clients.
So as you know, Genuine focuses on video powered communities, right? Short form, user first, creator driven, as well as that aggregation of brand. And it could be employee content, right? Mm-hmm. As you're thinking about it, and we don't have to put a brand or client into this rubric, but as you're thinking about the brand marketing mindset, what thoughts, what advice would you give to brands trying to navigate this space more broadly without just copying a strategy that they put on TikTok or Instagram?
Yeah, I think that I'd go back to Beers with Friends' brand in a can framework. Know thyself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to know who you are, what you want people to leave, what impression you want people to have about you when you're not in the room, and use that as a filter to figure out what trends you're jumping into and whatnot. So the first piece of advice is know thyself. The second piece of advice, and this just comes from how I've seen our clients architect their marketing organizations, they are building them to work for their goals. They are not going to one-stop shops and like they are empowered. They have tools at their own fingertips. They've got a point of view. Like no longer do you need to have an agency tell you everything to do, right? And hand it over on a silver platter. These are scrappy hands-on teams and they are building their resourcing model around that. And so we've seen clients doing a process one way, figure out this model works, and re-architect their whole staffing model and agency construct around us. So I think modern marketers should continue to feel empowered to build the team that will enable them to execute the strategy that they need to and find the right partners and DIY.
Oh, and you're no stranger, obviously, to innovation. We talked about our Web3 overlap. You ran a podcast called Web 2.5, which is a term I thought I made up, and you had already come up with. So if that doesn't tell you how aligned we are, but
Yes.
it's a signal that tech isn't really always just hype, right? But it needs grounding. And now we're in this emerging tech renaissance, yes, with blockchain, certainly with AI that's reshaping consumer engagement. Do you try and infuse any of that tech sometimes without it being asked for, or do you wait for the questions to come up before you drop your knowledge bombs on your
Right.
clients and partners?
Well, clients don't ask for Web3 as much as they used to. So, I would say a couple things. I mean, one, I think there's creativity in technology. And so part of what is important for us is to stay on top of what can technology enable you to do and what are creative ways that you could use it to achieve your goals. And that's why I was so excited about Genuine, because I think when you have technology that empowers you to achieve your goals, like that unlocks value. So I think creativity can live in technology, not just in quote unquote creative. So that's thing one. I think thing two, what Web 2.5 taught me was the importance of use cases. The concept of the show never was about the technology. It was always how Web3 technology meets
Applications,
the
yeah.
real world and the
Yeah.
application. So it's sitting between quote unquote Web 2, the real world, and Web 3, this innovative place. And so I would have on the show folks at major corporations and small startups applying the technology in really innovative ways. And I think the lesson from that has very much carried over for me in Beers with Friends, in that if all we tell people is we're creativity on tap, they don't know the use cases that it's for. And it actually, something that we did is we built our entire website on Shopify and named over 60 different beer runs, which are use cases for hiring us. Everything from campaigns to hot beep ideas in a can, which is, a deck of cool ideas. Um, you know, to holiday, to emergency beer runs, to all different kinds of themes, so that we could position ourselves squarely in the use cases where you might want to give us a call.
So it's productization of services, of the opportunities to partner with you, which I find really interesting. And the Shopify model is a great one. And you always hear, oh, we want to be the Shopify of dot dot dot, or what used to be the Uber of dot dot dot. And that speaks to what new innovative formats can ultimately become, setting that template for. And I think big social platforms did that really well early on, and may not be as followable, if that's a term, as maybe they used to be. And we certainly are pushing for the opportunities around brand owned experiences, right? How brands should think about reclaiming certain controls or their relationship with their consumers. And this idea, so remarkable and makeable, right? And remarketable and all the variations and offshoots of what that can be, which would be fun just to talk about. How do those qualities translate into a consumer connection, and how do you measure it and know that it was a success? Because if you're out for a beer with someone, you don't necessarily know the next morning whether they had fun or not unless you go back and ask them, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, attribution, certainly we could have a whole podcast series about attribution and what's the right way to do it. I think for us, what's most helpful is measuring what we can control. And so after every beer run, we actually send out a net promoter score survey. And we ask, based on this experience, how likely are you to recommend beers with friends to a friend? We also do the product market fit questions, and we ask a couple other, quotes and other kinds of things, because we're really interested in that feedback. And the funnel for an agency to have an award level winning piece of work is really challenging, right? And kudos to the agencies that do it and set out for that to be their goal. A lot of that process is deeply architected, but you've got to pitch the client, win the pitch, have a good brief, make great work. The client actually has to make the work, and you're hoping for a business impact that's real and measurable. And so when we set out to do this with Beers with Friends, we said, look, let's measure what we can control, and let's ask clients right off, like, how was this experience, right? Did you get what you needed? Did you get what you pay for? There's a million things between delivery of a blueprint and work in the world, between your paid media budget, whether or not, you got a new boss that squashed the work, in the next quarter. Like, it's like a video game, and there's just things flying in everywhere. And so if we can measure what we just delivered and can control, at least we can immediately put that feedback back into the process. And if the other pieces pan out, amazing. We're so thrilled for our clients when the work's in the world and it's driving the business forward, and we love when that happens. And we're happy to deliver great work and keep the client moving forward. However, when they want to give us the ball, we run it down the field and we give it back. Like, we just want to make that a great experience and give them what they need.
You're mixing metaphors now, but sports and beer always did go well together. So I don't think anyone who has created a Super Bowl spot would argue with that mixture.
Yes.
But I want to mix two things that don't always go well together, which is beer and maybe something quick hitting like a shot. So all the insights that would have fit in a pint glass, we're now going to try and put into a shot glass for you. I know we're flushing the format here,
okay,
but a couple of quick final hits, some shots. I don't know. It came to me very quickly. Okay. So, is there a brand or a company that you think out there that you're like obsessed with how they're doing it in terms of just marketing right now?
I hate choosing. But I know why it's good, because the more that I say, the more you can tag them in the post after this. And
no, you know what? If you want to shoot that one over your shoulder because it's bad tequila, we can do that. So instead, I will ask you maybe like a favorite campaign that you've worked on that you could talk about.
Sure, I have a couple that haven't launched yet that I'm so excited about. So that coming soon. ... And we'll drop that there. I think a campaign that just came out that I'm really proud of is a campaign that we did for Dig In. Newsflash, if you didn't know or hadn't been paying attention, they were originally Dig In. They then shortened it and went by Dig, and they now just brought back the In. And
so In was out, and now In is in again.
In is in, correct.
Okay.
And so we helped them develop a campaign around that moment called Always In, INN, that I think it's tapping into something that's very big right now, which is a trend called nostalgia, which is how do we look back but also make it new. And in particular, what's fun about nostalgia is that we're all feeling it and experiencing it on things that weren't really that long ago. So Dig was established in 2011. There's a lot of fun stuff from the 2010s to tap into. So the brand made a Tumblr page, which was big back then. They brought back their millennial pink Dig In bag that they had back then. So there's just a lot of fun stuff. So I'm proud of that, because I think to get to a place where you have a meaningful campaign like that, one, I'm just proud of the relationship that we have with Dig In. I think Jessica Serrano is an extremely talented marketer, and we just deeply enjoy working with her. Two, she's built a brand, she's built an ecosystem of partners around her, and we love being part of the interagency team. And it's very collaborative, so we really enjoy that. And I think three, she, just to keep the beer metaphors going, they bought a 6-pack. And so we work with them every quarter on their seasonal launches. And you get to a place where you really know the ethos of the brand. And so you know that, great cooking never goes out of style. And they're not really about trends and fads and robots. And so once you get to know a brand over time like that, you really can jam and come up with something that resonates. So that's a campaign that I'm really proud of.
Last question. So we're gonna tap it one more time. A piece of advice or guidance for marketers who may feel stuck between doing what's expected and what's possible. What would that be?
Yeah, I think so. My advice to marketers who are experiencing that tension would be to go back to something that I found to be successful when I was running social at Walmart. I think particularly in larger, more established organizations, you've got to sell in the strategy and get everybody aligned on what you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it. And that gives you the runway to get out there and start to, make micro decisions without a lot of approval process and hovering. I think for me, when I was at Walmart, getting buy-in to say, look, social deserves investment and here's why it's important. And we want to go out there and really build the brand through social. And not only that, but be relevant in culture and respond in real time. And here are some of the strategies that we're going to do, including defending the brand, which was something the business was not doing previously. It was sort of letting negative comments go. Getting that buy-in and alignment meant we had some incredible runway to go and execute the day-to-day against that. So my advice to people who feel ambitious but feel trapped within the context of their organization, get the buy-in to the strategy, and then go find partners, whether it's independent agile agencies like Beers with Friends or others, or fractional freelance talent, whatever you need to go make it happen. Build the team around it, but go sell in that strategy, get the alignment, and it'll make the day-to-day so much easier.
I have to say that was a perfect pour. So you
I don't know
finished
what the
perfectly.
metaphor count is at.
You know what? If we kept going, I'm sure we would tire of this, and it might go stale or skunked, but we won't go there.
Yes.
Instead, I will just say thank you for helping us make a genuine connection, Dana. It was really a pleasure getting inside that brain, hearing how you think, how you've brought these new ideas to life. I'm excited to see more of the work that you do with your partners, and just keep track as you continue to build in your community.
Absolutely. Well, I think Genuine's solving a really important pain point, and cheering you all and cheersing you all on as well. So thanks for having me on.